The salt-crusted man coughed, pulling himself onto the sand. Waves crashed around him, indifferent to his plight. He was alone. Shipwreck survivors often talk about the deafening silence that follows the roar of the sea. This silence, however, was punctuated by the man's own ragged breaths. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through him. He had never felt so utterly abandoned. Days blurred into nights. The sun, a relentless god, beat down on him. Hunger gnawed at his belly, a constant companion to his fear. The island, once a terrifying emerald jewel in a sea of blue, became his whole world. He searched for fresh water, finding a meager trickle from a rocky outcrop. He ate strange berries, praying they wouldn't be his last meal. Sleep offered little respite, haunted by nightmares of the churning sea. Each sunrise brought a fresh wave of despair. Would he ever escape this watery prison? Was anyone even searching? He cried out, his voice swallowed by the wind, a prayer lost in the vastness of the sky. But deep within him, a tiny ember of hope flickered. He had survived the storm. He would find a way to live. Necessity, they say, is the mother of invention. And on that deserted island, the man rediscovered himself. Gone was the city dweller, the man of appointments and deadlines. He was now a builder, a hunter, a survivor. He scavenged the wreckage of the ship, thanking Providence for the gifts the tide brought in. Using driftwood and palm fronds, he began to build. It started as a simple lean-to, a meager shelter from the elements. But as days turned into weeks, it evolved. He found a rhythm in his labor, a sense of purpose that pushed back against the despair. The shelter, however rudimentary, became a symbol of his will to live. There were moments, sitting by his fire at night, that a strange peace settled over him. He would look up at the vast canopy of stars, a sight unseen in the city's light-polluted sky. He felt a connection to something larger than himself, a feeling he couldn't quite name. It wasn't religion, not the God of his childhood. It was something more primal, a deep-seated understanding of his place in the grand tapestry of existence. One night a storm rolled in, not the raging tempest that had claimed his ship, but a vicious squall nonetheless. The wind howled like a banshee, tearing at his shelter. Rain lashed down, turning the sand into a muddy quagmire. He huddled inside, fear a cold fist around his heart. And then, he smelled it, smoke. The fire, his constant companion, his source of warmth and hope, had betrayed him. A stray ember, carried by the wind, had ignited the dry palm fronds of his shelter. He watched in numb horror as flames consumed weeks of work, his only sanctuary against the elements. The fire raged, a mocking echo of the inferno that had claimed his ship. When the storm finally subsided, leaving behind a trail of devastation, he broke. He fell to his knees amidst the smoldering ruins of his shelter, a primal scream escaping his lips. Where was the justice? What god would abandon him so completely? He shook his fist at the heavens, tears mixing with the rain on his face. All hope, it seemed, had finally been extinguished. Section 4. A beacon in the night. Exhausted, defeated, he collapsed on the beach. He lay there for hours, the rhythmic crash of waves his only company. As dawn broke, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, he felt a hand on his shoulder. He flinched, fear shooting through him. He was alone, had been alone for what felt like an eternity. He opened his eyes. A figure stood before him, silhouetted against the rising sun. A man, clad in the uniform of a ship's captain. Behind him, he saw it, a ship, riding the waves just offshore. Rescue. The word echoed in his mind, too incredible to be true. "Saw your signal fire last night," the captain said, his voice gruff but kind. "Knew someone was in trouble." Signal fire? It was then that he understood. The fire that had destroyed his shelter, the source of his despair, had also been his salvation. He looked back at the smoldering remains, seeing them now in a new light. A beacon, not a tragedy. Section 5. Faith's Guiding Light. The journey back to civilization was a blur. He stood on the deck of the ship, watching his island prison recede into the distance. He carried with him the scars of his ordeal, both physical and emotional. But he also carried something else. A profound sense of gratitude and a newfound understanding of faith. He had railed against the heavens, cursed the hand he thought had been dealt to him. But all the while, a plan was unfolding, a plan beyond his comprehension. The fire, a symbol of utter destruction, had become his salvation. He learned that even in the darkest of times, hope can emerge from the most unexpected places. His story is a parable for our times, a reminder that even when we feel lost and alone, even when our carefully constructed shelters crumble around us, there is a larger force at play. We may not always understand it, we may rage against it, but it is there nonetheless. All we can do is keep the embers of hope burning in our hearts, and trust that even in the face of despair, a beacon of light will guide us home.